The case against David Marshall Murdock seemed pretty solid enough for the state of Florida to seek the death penalty. David's ex-fiancée, 56-year-old Lisa Bunce, was sitting on the screened-in porch with her best friend Sanda Anderson after a night out, when David pulled up and opened fire. He shot Lisa twice while she was on the porch, and she tried to crawl into the house to hide in the closet. David shot Sanda once in the face. Then he went inside, found Lisa, and fired 2 more shots. He called 911 and told them that he had to do it because he had to get rid of the devil. Sanda miraculously lived to testify against David. Plus, David stayed there at the house in the yard waiting on police to come after he called them. The shots were confirmed to come from his gun, and his gun had his DNA on the trigger and on the grip. Plus, David's on video entering the gated community just minutes before. It seems pretty open and shut, right? But David Murdock pled not guilty to the murder of Lisa, the attempted murder of Sanda, plus burglary with a firearm, and shooting into a building or dwelling. So how can he plead not guilty to the charges when there's not really any question that he's responsible? Well, we found out. David testified during his own death penalty trial. He wanted the opportunity to give his side of the story, and his defense is not what I was expecting. But is it enough to convince a jury to spare his life? My name is Brandi Churchwell, and this is 13th Juror Podcast, where we unravel complex court cases and present them as compelling stories, breaking down the details and weighing the evidence from a non-legal perspective, just like the jurors do. Today, we are taking a look at the tragic murder of 56-year-old Lisa Bunce and the attempted murder of her best friend, Sanda Andrews, and the man who said that he had to do it to get rid of the devil, David Marshall Murdock. Part 2, The Trial. On March 6th, 2024, more than 5 years after the death of Lisa Bunce, jury selection finally began for the trial of David Murdock. It took a few days to select a jury. Polk County is small, and there were a number of jurors that were dismissed based on knowing people involved in the trial. One of those jurors that was dismissed actually knew David, and he didn't hold back his feelings on him. The following is read directly from the transcript of the prospective juror talking to the judge.
I know that guy, first of all. I know David.
The judge confirms with the prospective juror that he knows Mr. Murdock, and the man says yes. Then the judge asks him a few more questions. Judge, how do you know him?
He's a bad dude.
I'm sorry?
He's not, I probably shouldn't say that, but...
You have an opinion of Mr. Murdock?
In my opinion, he's not a good person, no.
And that opinion would interfere with your ability to be fair and impartial in this case?
Yeah. Actually, back in 75, he was dating this girl named Tanya, and then they broke up, and I started dating her, and then I started having all kinds of issues with him, including one time he called me up on the phone and threatened me. He was going to do this, that, and the other. And of course, I was a kid. I was stupid. So he came over to my house with his brother-in-law, which would be Tanya's sister's husband. I found out later that he had a gun in the car whenever he come over there. Well, I was young and I was going to go fight him. And then I got right to the car and I'm a little nervous. Sorry. I got right to the car and my mom, she's hollering out she's going to call the police. And that stopped it. And that may have saved my life. I don't know if he was actually going to shoot me or not. I don't know. But I know that guy and he's not a good dude.
So, this man, who was 18 at the time, started dating David's ex. David gave him problems, threatened him, showed up to his house with a gun, and then he goes on to tell the judge about the back and forth drama in their love triangle. It was a lot. But he says he has a history with David, and he said he knows what kind of guy he is. David, of course, has a different version of the story that he outlines in an email to his brother. Whatever the true story is, doesn't really matter in this situation because the prospective juror who told the judge that David is a bad dude was dismissed. So it takes a few days, but they find a jury. And 5 days after the start of jury selection, opening statements began. The jury listened as prosecutor Eric Johnson laid out the facts of the case, from the time that Lisa and David met to the night that he shot her and Sanda, through the investigation and the evidence that he says they will hear against David to prove premeditation. Then it's time for the defense's opening statements. And at first, it looks like we might be getting some insight into what their case will be. Defense attorney Deborah Tuomi tells the jury their version of what happened during opening statements. Tuomi claimed that David was trying to build a life with Lisa. He wanted to give her security, love, and respect. When he and Lisa fell in love, she was estranged from her husband, but the divorce wasn't final yet. But that didn't matter to David. He was so in love that he put Lisa's name on the deed to the house anyway. He thought that he had found his life partner. The defense attorney says that it was only 6 or 7 months after moving in that Lisa brings her group of friends to move her things, along with some of David's things, out of the house. David is even helping her with this because he doesn't know that he won't be following Lisa to Ohio to live happily ever after. Once Lisa was gone, David gets a text from her breaking off their relationship. The defense attorney says that David's heart was broken and he was humiliated. She asks that they keep that in mind as we go through the trial. Tuomi makes it sound like the defense is going to be crime of passion, maybe, hoping to rule out premeditation. But when David Murdock takes the stand, we hear something totally different. But before we get to the defense's case, the prosecution presents theirs. The state took less than 4 days to present their case against David Murdock. Most of the witnesses called by the prosecution were the builders of the case: law enforcement, forensics, DNA analysts, crime scene investigators, medical examiners, ballistics, etc. Out of 16 witnesses, only 3 were civilian witnesses. There was Joni Masad, who lived across the street from Sanda. There was Lynn, David's ex-girlfriend. And, of course, Sanda herself. The state's entire case is laid out through the witnesses and the evidence that's brought in. Cell towers corroborate David leaving his home around 12:45 or so and heading towards Sweetwater. They see the video and still shots of him putting in the gate code to get in. They hear the timing of the shots only minutes later, and they hear the 911 call he made, saying that he just shot 2 people. They hear all about the things that were confirmed through testing and investigation as well, that the gun belonged to David and it was registered to him. His DNA was on the trigger and the grip. Lisa's blood was confirmed through DNA to be on the slide from the blowback, and the spent casings found on scene as well as the projectile lodged inside of Lisa all came from his gun. The jury also sees photos of the blood trail through the house where Lisa tried to get away to hide. And they see the gruesome pictures of the injuries as the medical examiner who performed the autopsy explains each part in detail. Now, during this part, when the pathologist is talking about the bullet wounds that took Lisa's life, David becomes emotional and starts to cry. It got to the point where he had to get himself together during a short recess before getting back in front of the jury in the courtroom. So, with this mountain of evidence, there's really no question of what happened that night, right? But it still doesn't explain why. What led to this? When David's ex-girlfriend Lynn took the stand, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Lynn sounds like a great lady, and she thought that she had found a great man, and so did her parents. Lynn's a registered nurse who retired, but she went back to work 2 days a week anyway, and she's super close with her mom and her stepfather. She would spend a lot of time with them, which is actually how her relationship with David began. Lynn's mom loved to dance, so one night in mid-August, Lynn took her mom and stepdad out to a music venue in Dundee to see a band, along with 2 of her girlfriends. Lynn's mom saw David there playing pool and walked right up to him and said, "These girls want to dance. Why don't you dance with them?" So they danced for a while, and David talked to Lynn's parents for a while, and Lynn felt special because she said that David was interested in her, not her 2 girlfriends who were also single. The 2 exchanged numbers and talked on the phone and decided to pursue a relationship. By mid-September, David was asking Lynn to change their relationship status on his new Facebook page. Their relationship continued over the next few months. They would go listen to live music and bands, have Sunday dinner at Lynn's parents' house, and David had Lynn and her parents over for barbecues at his place. Her parents loved David. They thought that Lynn had found herself a good man. David even took Lynn to his grandson's birthday party that fall. Lynn was happy. She thought she met a stable, hardworking Southern gentleman that would be honest to her, something that she hadn't had before. On New Year's Eve, about 4 months into their relationship, Lynn and David met at Beef O'Brady's and had dinner. After dinner, they dropped David's truck off at Lynn's and rode together to New Grove Lounge, where Lynn's friends were going to be. New Grove Lounge also happens to be the place that Sanda and Lisa spent every New Year's Eve for the last several years before that. But obviously, Lynn wouldn't have known that. So this is Lynn's version of that night, which is different than the version that David will tell, but we'll get to that. She said their plan was to meet up with her friends and hang out until around 11, then go to her parents to ring in the new year. When they got to the bar, her friends already had a table and they saved Lynn and David a seat. Lynn said that when they sat down, she noticed that David kept looking at another table. Then he told her that it was his ex-girlfriend. Lynn said that she glanced over and she recognized Lisa from her Facebook pictures, because when she and David first got together, David had asked her to block Lisa on Facebook so that she didn't see any of the pictures that Lynn was posting of them together. Lynn said that she asked David if it's okay that Lisa is there or if they should leave, because she knew that he had said that he was having issues with her, but she said that David told her it's fine, so they stayed. They spent the night dancing and listening to music, talking with Lynn's friends, but there were a couple times that Lynn looked over and she said that she saw David looking intently at Lisa's table. The third time that she saw this happening, it bothered her. She got up and went to the other side of the table with her friends and told them what was happening, basically asking them, hey, help me keep a lookout. Keep an eye on him. What's going on? Why is he staring at Lisa? Lynn said that she went back to the other side of the table and David was gone. He had walked outside. Lynn had been cheated on before, and she had this gut feeling about the way that David was looking at Lisa. She knew that something was up, so she went out there to ask David what was going on, because what he was doing was disrespectful and she didn't like it. Lynn said that David got mad. He told her that Lisa used to accuse him of cheating on her, and he won't tolerate jealousy, so they needed to leave immediately. So Lynn took David back to her house to get his truck, and he told her that he was going home. Needless to say, not how Lynn was planning on spending her New Year's Eve. The next day, on the 1st, she called David to see if he was going to go to her parents' house for New Year's for a New Year's Day meal, but he said his blood pressure was too high and he didn't feel like he could go out. The next day, on the 2nd, there were a couple of texts, but they still hadn't seen each other yet. On the 3rd, David texted Lynn and told her that he wanted to come over to talk. So when David got there, he told Lynn that Lisa had been reaching out to him and told him that she's going to come back to live at their home during the winter. He said that he told Lisa no because it's not her home, and even with her name on the deed, she hadn't paid any money toward it, so she wasn't entitled to come stay. David failed to mention that he was actually texting Lisa. Lynn asked about New Year's Eve and why David was staring at Lisa like that. David told her that his past experience is that when Lisa drinks, she would get violent, so he was keeping an eye on her. Lynn said that she kind of accepted his explanations and they patched things up. The next day, on the 4th, Lynn worked until around 6, and then she had to be on call that night. So she told David, don't bother coming over. She's just going to stay home, and then they can get together when she's off or not on call. So she got something to eat, took a nap, and woke up around 10 o'clock that night. When she woke up, she got on her phone. That is when she saw a Facebook message from Sanda's Facebook account. Lynn said that she opened the message, and it said, "This is Lisa. I'm reaching out to you to save you the heartache for the 2.5 years and let you know what's been going on." Lisa sent a ton of screenshots of text messages that had been going on for months from David to Lisa. The first one that she saw was the one from David telling Lisa on New Year's Eve night that she looked so beautiful that he couldn't keep his eyes off of her, which caused him and Lynn to be done. Lynn was really hurt reading this. She called her friends who told her to confront him. So she called him and no answer, texted him, but no answer. She waited a bit, and then she called again, and this time he picked up. Lynn tells David that her gut feeling on New Year's Eve was that he was still in love with Lisa, And then all the stuff about how Lisa was reaching out to him and saying that she wanted to stay there. She said all of that was totally different than these screenshots that she had just been sent. Lynn said that she wasn't going to be in this type of relationship. They were finished. She spent the next 3 hours deleting everything with David. Pictures, posts, tagged photos, everything that she had of their life together. She wanted it gone. While she was in the middle of doing this, around 12:45 a.m., David called her back. She said that she answered the phone and David said, "I'm awake now." Lynn said, "So?" Lynn didn't care that he was awake now. There was nothing else to say. They were done. Lynn said that David made the comment, "I can't believe she done that." And then he hung up the phone. That was the last time that Lynn heard David's voice. And within half an hour, Lisa would be dead. Last Christmas, I have all these beautiful pictures of my family and friends. Everyone's in their cute holiday clothes, hair looking nice, the whole 9 yards. I am only in one of those pictures. Why? Because I had an unexpected breakout right before the holidays, and I had a pimple on my nose that made me look like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And while that would have been festive if it were on purpose, it just looked awful in pictures. Feeling confident in your skin starts with getting expert care. That's why we're excited to partner with Apostrophe. Whether you're dealing with acne, signs of aging, dark spots, or a breakout like mine, Apostrophe helps you get access to the right treatments for your skin. Apostrophe is an online platform that connects you with an expert dermatology team to get customized acne and dermatology treatment for your unique skin. Through Apostrophe, you can get access to oral and topical medications that use clinically proven ingredients to help clear acne. Simply fill out an online consultation about your skin goals and medical history, then snap a few selfies and dermatology provider will create a customized treatment plan just for you. Apostrophe offers access to prescription treatments for all types of acne, from hormonal acne to facial acne, and even back, chest, and butt acne. Treat breakouts from head to toe. And aside from occasional breakouts, I'm also really interested in improving my skin's texture. So having access to an expert dermatology team that can get me on a tailored treatment plan, all without having to try to find time for an in-person appointment to a doctor and then waiting at a pharmacy, sign me up. We have a special deal for our audience. Get your first visit for only $5 at apostrophe.com/juror when you use our code JUROR. That's a savings of $15. This code is only available to our listeners. To get started, just go to apostrophe.com/juror and click Get Started. Then use our code JUROR at sign up and you'll get your first visit for only $5. Thank you, Apostrophe, for sponsoring this episode. About halfway through the first day of trial, the state calls Sanda Anderson to the stand. Now, to get up to the witness stand, Sanda has to walk directly in front of David, who's sitting at the defense table. She takes the stand and is asked first what happened to her.
Ms. Andrews, what happened to you on January 5th of 2019 around 1:10 a.m.?
I was shot in the face while my girlfriend was murdered.
She says, I was shot in the face while my girlfriend was murdered. She's then asked another question.
Do you recognize who shot you on January 5th of 2000?
Oh, yes, I do. David Murdock sat right there at that table.
When she says this, Sanda lowers her chin, raises her eyebrows, and points directly toward David, looking her best friend's killer in the face. Sanda gives background information on her friendship with Lisa, how they met David, the dynamics of their relationship when things got rocky, and she talks about running into David on New Year's Eve, less than a week before he showed up and shot them, and she describes the night of the shootings. Sanda tells the jury that she and Lisa came back to the house that night to get some rest because they were getting up early the next day to travel to surprise Lisa's brother Terry for his birthday. She says that they put on some comfy clothes, went to sit in the front porch area, and were out there chatting when they saw David pull up.
David's truck came screeching up to my driveway, slammed on his brakes, raced up the street, screeched, slammed brakes into my driveway. I immediately dialed 911. Lisa and I both said, "Oh crap, it's him." And as he opened his door, I yelled, "David, get back in your car. You don't belong here. I've already dialed 911.
Sanda said the next thing she knew, shots were being fired. She didn't even realize that David had crossed the space between his truck and the house. The first thing she remembers is hearing a loud noise, and she could see Lisa out of the corner of her eye trying to leave the porch and get into the living room through the sliding glass door. The first shot fired was about 18 inches from her, through the screen on the porch toward Lisa. Then came the second shot.
I will tell you, the second shot was on me.
And how do you
I
know?
was busy trying to figure out what the first noise was. Mouth open, trying to get my ear to work. God was with me, because the bullet went in right here. That's not a dimple. And came out right here. This wad of skin is the exit. And I hit the floor.
Sanda points to the scars on her cheeks where the bullet entered and where it exited. Sanda explains that David tried to get in the front door to the porch, but it was locked, so she heard him go to the back door, open it, and go inside.
I heard him take more steps, and then I heard more gunshot.
Sanda is still on the phone with 911 at this point.
On the floor, face down, still screaming into my phone with a broken palate. And trying to get 911 to understand they needed to get her right now.
Sanda's 911 call is played in court. You can hear the fear in her voice and the frustration as she's trying desperately to get the dispatcher to understand what she's saying as she tells her that she's been shot and she begs for help.
Hello? You've been shot? Ma'am, you've been shot?
While the call is played, Sanda becomes emotional. She looks down, wipes her tears with a tissue, but tries to shield her eyes from view. At the defense table, David also becomes emotional, wiping tears from his face with a tissue while Sanda is heard pleading for help, telling them that David has just shot her and her best friend. The first gunshot was fired right by Sanda's head, hurting her eardrum. She had her mouth open, reacting to the loud noise as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. The bullet entered through the side of her face, but because she had her mouth open, it thankfully exited out of the fleshy part of her cheek on the other side. But there was a lot of damage that was still done. Sanda had 37 fractures in her jaw, and a broken upper palate, a ditch across her tongue from the burn of the bullet, teeth that were knocked out, and she almost lost her left eye. During cross-examination, defense attorney Deborah Tuomi tried to paint David as a jilted lover, and she did some victim blaming when talking about Lisa, claiming that Lisa yelled at David when he got there. I think her hope here was to convince the jury that David only fired those shots on impulse because Lisa yelled at him. But it's a pretty weak argument. David got his gun from the case at his home, got in his truck, drove half an hour to Sanda's neighborhood. He can be seen entering the gate code to get in, and within just a few minutes of entering the gate, fired the shots at Lisa, then Sanda, then went inside to finish the job that he came there to do. He then called police and told them that he did it because he quote-unquote had to. He didn't say that he snapped, he didn't say that he was pushed into a rage, or that it was a spur-of-the-moment mistake. He said that he had to. He drove half an hour to do it, and he did it. Lisa could have spit in his face when he got there, and it wouldn't have changed the fact that this looks like premeditation. But that'll be for each juror to decide. The first 4 days of the trial were spent meticulously laying out the prosecution's case. A lot of the evidence is so rock solid that it's hard to do much of a cross-examination on any of it. But most of the questioning seemed to be aimed at hoping to show reasonable doubt that there was premeditation. The defense attorney kind of painted Lisa as the villain and poor old David as the jilted lover who was just trying to do everything he could for the woman he loved. David apparently wasn't happy with the way that the trial was going. I obtained his email communication from jail during this time, and in an email to his daughter, he writes the following. I am really not happy with my attorney. She is taking this in the wrong direction. As I see it, there are things I want brought up, but she does not want to. She is trying to keep me from getting on the stand to tell the jury what she, Lisa, used to do to me. I think the jury needs to hear both sides, not just one. So I told her I am going to take the stand, and what happens, happens. I do believe I can handle the prosecutor, but she thinks I can't. A day or so later, he writes another email to his daughter to update her. It reads, We have no court on Friday. It will resume on Monday. I most likely will be taking the stand. My attorney didn't want me to, but I told her I'm going to. They need to hear both sides, not just one. She doesn't want me to talk about my childhood, but I told her, sorry, it needs to come out, so the jury will understand. There's really no way to keep me off the stand. I have to do this. So there's a few things happening here. Number one, David said that his attorney is telling him, do not take the stand, but he says he's going to anyway. I'll save all of my backwoods Georgia sayings about how you only catch a fish when they open their mouth. Testifying in your own defense is rarely a good idea. Number two, David is saying that he wants to get up on the stand and tell the jury both sides because he wants them to know how Lisa used to treat him. So getting up on the stand and bad-mouthing the woman who you murdered is probably not going to get you much sympathy here. Your best bet to have a jury spare your life is usually going to be to take responsibility and show remorse. There aren't two sides to this story in the way that he's saying. It doesn't matter if he thinks that Lisa was a bad girlfriend or a terrible person or everything in between. He drove there and murdered her in cold blood. You don't get to play the victim here. And third, David said that he wants to tell the jury about his childhood, but his attorney doesn't want him to. So this is complicated, but I gotta side with his attorney on this one because bringing up your bad childhood is something that is maybe better reserved for the penalty phase of the trial, not the guilt phase. Having a tough childhood isn't going to take away legal culpability for the murder and attempted murder of two people who had nothing to do with that bad childhood. But while it may not take away legal culpability, child abuse and neglect can have lifelong impacts on a person. So these are factors that can definitely be taken into consideration if the jury is deciding between death penalty or life in prison. So, brief rundown of David's past according to him and some of his family members. David was the youngest of 4 when he was born, but he was unwanted, and his mom made sure to tell him that. She even told him the story about how she had an appointment to have surgery to prevent more pregnancies, but Dr. Marshall forgot about the appointment and was out playing golf. By the time she went back to try again, she was pregnant with David and couldn't do the surgery. She said that she gave David the middle name Marshall after the doctor to, quote, remind me how much I hated that son of a bitch because I did not want you, end quote. When David was an infant, his dad set fire to their house and was committed into a psychiatric hospital. His mom had another baby after that and then married a guy named Buddy Gatlin, who became their stepfather. Buddy and David's mom had 4 more kids, so we're up to 9 total now. Buddy was loving and kind to his biological children, but not his stepkids. He was physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive to David and his older sisters. He was also abusive to David's mom, and David would try to stand up for her, which made Buddy excessively cruel to David. When David was 12 or 13, his mom and stepfather were taken to court for suspected child abuse, and David and his siblings were removed from the home and put in foster care for about a year. But this was the early 70s. It was a very different time back then. The judge ended up not prosecuting the case because if he did, the stepfather would go to jail for a long time. where he belonged, and Mom would be sent to a mental facility for the rest of her life. So the kids were returned home after a year. Home life was chaotic. David went to 15 different schools. He failed 7th, 8th, and 9th grades, got into fights, got suspended. He spent a year sleeping in the back seat of his mom's car because there was no bed for him inside. He ran away and moved in with his grandma for a few months and then dropped out of school when he was 16, started working to pay for rent and clothes. He did join the National Guard, but he was dishonorably discharged, and then he started working again. 4 marriages, 4 divorces, and a lot of childhood trauma. We'll hear more about that during the penalty phase. But these are some of the things that David is wanting to tell the jury. And he writes to his daughter that he feels like the jurors need to know. The state's case ends on a Thursday. And there's no court on Friday. So David has a long weekend to think it over and decide if he's going to take the stand. So Monday rolls around. The state rests, and the judge asked David Marshall Murdock if he wants to testify in his own defense. To my surprise, he said yes. I'm not really sure what I pictured or thought I would hear when it came to David's testimony, but whatever I expected, it wasn't this. Unfortunately, the video and audio was no longer available after the second day of trial. So I got my hands on the trial transcripts, 2,909 pages. But boy, am I glad I went through it, because without the transcripts, we wouldn't have even known that David took the stand. There was surprisingly little to no media coverage of this case. His testimony is interesting. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But before he even makes it to the stand, he's already doing things differently. The whole thing started out with David's attorney letting the judge know that David was requesting that when he is sworn in, he wants to be sworn in with his hand on a Bible. Now, in the days leading up to David taking the stand, he talked to his daughter and he did try to organize this whole Bible thing. The jail would not allow him to take his Bible from the jail to court. So David emailed his daughter, Althea, and asked her to bring him a Bible because he said, quote, "I will not swear in without my hand on the Bible. God is my real father. He will be the one I have to answer to when he comes, not man," end quote. Now, in recent years, courts have moved away from religious practices, including swearing on the Bible. You'll notice that witnesses that you see in real trials often hold up their right hand as they're sworn in, but the days of having the other hand on the Bible are often a thing of the past. The attorneys and the judge discuss this outside the presence of the jury. The judge has no issue allowing David to swear with his hand on the Bible, but there are still a few issues here. The state's issue is that they don't want him to make it some big feature of the trial, like a theatrical presentation. They also don't want it to impact how his testimony is perceived based on any juror's religious convictions. Like his testimony on a Bible means more than the rest of the witnesses who didn't testify on a Bible. He wants everything to be the same as all the other witnesses so that the jury can weigh David's credibility and testimony just like everybody else's. The judge's issue is that none of the other witnesses have been sworn in using a Bible. So if the jury sees that David is being sworn in with a Bible, it could give the appearance that the court is forcing him to do something different and not treating him the same as all the other witnesses. The state offers a solution of having David swear on the Bible outside the presence of the jury to prevent both issues, and then swear him in the same as all the other witnesses when they come in. Tuomi doesn't want to accept that offer. She said that David specifically wants to be sworn in front of the jury with a Bible. The judge ultimately decides that he is not going to permit David to place his hand on the Bible to be sworn in front of the jury, but he can do it before they come in. He points out that David has been in court multiple times and has had to testify, and never once has he requested a Bible to be sworn in. He says even earlier that morning when the judge spoke to him, he said that he swore him in and David didn't request a Bible then. Based on that, he says He thinks that it's just for the jury's benefit, which will make him appear different than the other witnesses, which may be perceived in different ways from the jurors. So, he said David can do it before they come in, but not in front of them. So, they get the Bible. David places his left hand on the Bible and his right hand in the air. The clerk says, "Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" David responds, "So help me God, I do." The jury is brought in, and the state rests its case for the record. Then, defense attorney Tuomi calls David Murdock to the stand. The clerk reads the same oath, and David gives the same response in front of the jury. "So help me God, I do." I wasn't able to get audio of David's testimony, but the court reporter did a great job of capturing not only what he said, but also some of the phonetic spellings to indicate dialect. Since there's no audio, I'm going to have the transcript read for his testimony. Also, David does this sort of odd monologue type testimony when answering a lot of questions. There are times when his attorney tries to get him back on track, and during a sidebar, the prosecutor even says that he's let it go for the most part with the monologue thing and the hearsay, but it gets to be a lot in some instances. But there's a reason it's important. You'll notice that David gives a lot of details, like a lot of details. His answers are verbose in a way that often raises red flags during a defendant's testimony. I think it's important to hear, and since we don't have audio, and I don't have time to include everything in this episode, I'm going to release a bonus episode with his full testimony so that you can listen if you're interested in hearing it. I'll also release a second bonus episode with the cross-examination and the rebuttal. The cross-examination gets spicy. So, David takes the stand, and Tuomi starts by asking David to introduce himself, give his age, and the age that he was in 2016, which is when he met Lisa. David tells the jury that he moved into Cherry Pocket's fish camp in 2012. He bought his trailer, so he owned that, and he paid the lot rent at Cherry Pocket where he put his trailer when he moved in. Now, he had been living there for about 4 years when he first met Lisa. David then tells the story of the night that he met Lisa. Now, I'm going to play the reading of this part of the transcript because I think it's important to understand how his testimony went, but also to see how detailed David was in the things that he described. He's verbose in a way that generally raises red flags when a defendant is testifying. So here's a reading of the transcript where David is describing the night that he met Lisa.
I'm a contractor. In the wintertime, our work is kind of slow. And so I've been sitting at home. I had some personal issues. I didn't get out much, and then things got a little better. So on February the 21st, I lived right across the creek from the back of the restaurant. They got a back deck, and they have had a band that plays out there. And so I'm sitting on the deck, on my patio, and the band was playing. And I'm going to go out. So I went in, got dressed, went over, met some friends that live there. We talked. Mark and Deneen. Mark introduced his brother and their wife. I'd never met them. And his wife. I'd never met them. And Mark tells me, he goes, "Your uncle is with 4 women behind you." Well, I didn't go over there to meet my uncle or anything. I just went over there I wanted a beer. I don't drink much. I can buy a 6-pack of beers, and 6 months later, there'd be 3 beers still left in that 6-pack in the refrigerator. I'm not a drinker. So I turned around, and Mark says, "What do you think about the blonde?" And I said, "Well, the only thing I see was the back of her." And I said, "Well, she looks good," I said, "but I hadn't seen the front of her." Well, I got back in the conversation with them for about 10 minutes, and I told them, I said, "Look, I'm going to go around and talk to John because John's from Michigan. He's a friend of mine. He lives at the Pocket. Now, he's a Wolverines fan. I'm a Gator fan. And I'm sorry. Y'all FSU fans just kicked our butt for the last few years."
Yes, he really stopped mid-sentence to talk to the jury about being FSU fans kicking Gators' butts. He still hasn't made it to actually meeting Lisa. He continues.
So, as I go to talk around and talk to John, the bar that they have on the back deck is a boat. It's actually an original wooden sailboat, and the owner had brought it and set it up and made a bar out of it. And then had seats all the way around it. And the ladies that works inside the boat. And so her name is Kimmy. And then John was sitting on the side, which is Kimmy's husband. So as I go to walk around to talk to John, I'm walking by my uncle. And I say, "How you doing, Unc?" And he goes, "Doing okay, nephew." So I just didn't talk to any of the women. I just walked around and went around and started to talk to John. I told Kimmy, "I want a beer." I said, "Look, I want a beer." She goes, "Do what?" I said, "I want a beer." And she goes, "Dave, you don't drink." I said, "No, I want a Coors Light in a bottle." So she got me one. And so me and John's in a conversation. Next thing I know, all four of these women are standing around me, and my uncle says that they want to introduce themselves to you. And I said, "Well, okay." I remember Sanda Andrews to my left, and another lady by the name, I think her name was J. Lee or something like that. I can't actually remember her name. And then there was another lady to my right, a black-haired lady wearing glasses. And she gave me a name, but then I found out later it wasn't her real name. And then I felt somebody rubbing on the back of my head. And I turned and looked, and it's the blonde-haired lady. And she goes, "Oh, shit," and walked away. And so I looked at the women and I said, "Look," I said, "if I said something or done something wrong to her," I says, "I'm going to apologize to her." But I don't remember saying anything to her. And so the lady to the right, which is Jody, I found out later her name was Jody. She goes, "No." She goes, "She's got a thing for men going bald." Well, I was going bald, so I said, "Well, okay." So they talked a few minutes, and then they left, went back around outside the boat, and me and John started talking. And then I hear somebody hollering, "Hey, Dave! Hey, Dave!" And John's telling me, says, "Somebody's hollering for you." And I looked across the boat, and Lisa is calling me around, so I said, "Well, let me go see what she wants." So I go around, and I asked her, I said, "Did I say anything wrong to you?" She goes, "No, no, no, no." She says, "I just got a thing for men going bald." I said, "Well," I said, "I hadn't seen back there, so I didn't know I was really going that bald." But I said, and then she says, "Can I have your phone number?" Well, I didn't ask for her number. She asked for mine. And I said, "Okay." I says, "Look," I says, "I got some business cards." So I took out I own my own business. So I took out a business card. I gave her one. I gave Jody one. And Lisa says, "Oh, you got your own business?" And I said, "Yeah, it's just a small business. It's not a big one." So the band starts playing a slow dance, and Lisa says, "Would you like to dance?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." So we get up there, and we started dancing. And I'm looking in her eyes because she had some beautiful green eyes. And the next thing I know, she puts her hand behind my head and pulls me down and just puts a hell of a kiss on me. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It was a kiss I hadn't had in a long time. And I pulled my head back, and I looked at her like, wow. I mean, I didn't expect that either.
David says that Lisa was in town for that week, so he took her to dinner that Tuesday night and again that Friday night. He said that she loved seafood, so he took her to Red Lobster. Then they went to his place, and he said they got intimate. Now, his attorney interrupts him right there. David says the relationship with Lisa continued after she left. He would fly up there to see her sometimes. She would fly down there to see him sometimes. And the two got pretty serious pretty quickly. Now, David says that he was still married to his ex-wife Teresa at the time, but he and Teresa had been separated for about 5 years. He says that Lisa is the one who asked him to get a divorce, so he did, and she got a divorce from her husband that she was separated from so that they could be together. Now, David claims that Lisa called him one day crying and told him that she had to get out of Ohio because she said that her family is all over her about divorcing her soon-to-be ex-husband. She said that they won't leave her alone. David said that the Cherry Pickens community is only for ages 50 and up, so he only had one bedroom. It was for 50 and up, so it wouldn't work for Lisa to come down there because she would be bringing her son, who was only 12 at the time. David said that he told Lisa that he would find a bigger place for the three of them and that she could move down there to Florida. Sanda, who was a real estate agent, became David's buyer's agent. David describes finding the home that he ended up buying.
Lisa was down, and her and Sanda was already out looking at places. I was at work, and I was working down in Lake Placid. I had 3 of my employees with me, and I was coming back up from Lake Placid, and I got a phone call from Lisa. And she tells me, she goes, look, she goes, I'm at Calusa Lake. We're at Calusa Lake, me and Sanda. We're looking at this mobile home. She says, would you like to come by and look at it? She goes, it's nice. I said, well, give me the address. I said, I'm not far from there. I said, I'm just about 12 miles out. I says, so give me a little bit of time to get there. So she gave me the address.
David said he ended up going to the wrong house. He went to a house that was for sale one street over. He called Sanda and realized the mistake and then went and met Sanda and Lisa one street over at the house that they were looking at.
We look at this home. It's a 72. It was a 72 model mobile home. And they were asking like 92 or 94,000 for it. And I told her, no, that's way too much money for a 72. And I said, it being that old and it being a mobile home, I would never get it insured.
David told Sanda about the house that he had just gone to accidentally. So Sanda pulled it up, but saw that it was under contract already. A little time passes, and Sanda actually calls David when he's working one day to tell him that the contract fell through and that house is back on the market. So she asks if he wants to go take a look at it.
She goes, would you like to look at it? I said, definitely. I said, yeah, I would like to look at it. She goes, okay, when would be a good time? I said, well, I'm down in Okeechobee. I says, what about Saturday? She goes, 1, 2. I says, that'd be fine. I said, what time do you want to? She goes, around 1. I said, all right. So I get there to the house that Saturday about 12:30, and I go looking and walking around it, looking in the windows and looking to see if there's a lot of damage to it or whatever. The neighbor next door comes out and he introduces himself and he says, you're buying the home? I said, I'm just looking at it. I says, I don't know if I'm going to buy it or not.
David said that the neighbor told him to make a cash offer because the lady who lived there had passed and her kids lived up north and just wanted to get rid of the property.
And so Sanda says, you got to give them an offer. I said, okay. She goes, what are you going to offer them? I says, $55,000 cash. She looked at me and says, are you kidding me? I said, no. She goes, look, they're asking $94,000. They're not going to drop that low on this house. She goes, evidently you don't want it. I said, look, offer them $55,000 cash. I said, they got to come back with a counteroffer, right? She goes, yeah. I said, just offer them $55,000 cash. Said, okay. Says, evidently you don't want the home. I said, look, just offer them.
David said they came back with a counteroffer of $60,000 and he accepted. He got a cashier's check for $18,000 to hold the house. He sold his place at Cherry Pocket for $10,000, had his brother co-sign for a $10,000 loan, and had a friend of his loan him $7,000. And he made the rest from a big job that he was working and money he had in the bank. He said it took about 3 months, but he was able to come up with the money for the house. Now, as far as the name on the deed goes, David says that it was Lisa who asked for that. He says that she called him and said that if she moves down there with Nick, she's taking a big risk because if something happens to him, then his family could kick her out of the house and she and Nick wouldn't have anywhere to go. He said that Lisa told him that her divorce will be final soon and that she was getting a divorce settlement. So she can give him $30,000 back on the property, which is half of the $60,000 that he was paying. In exchange for that, her name would go on the deed. David said that he loved her and he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. And he wanted to provide her with that security that she wanted. So he agreed. He says that Lisa asked him not to say anything to Sanda about her asking to be put on the deed. That December, Lisa and Nick, who is now 14, moved into the house with David. David then moves into the details of Lisa moving back to Ohio. Now, he said that when they were packing up the moving truck, he put a bunch of his stuff in there because at that time, he thought he was going to be going up to Ohio with her. They would be up in Ohio for a while until Nick graduated, and then they would eventually go back to Florida. He said that Lisa told him about a house that she was going to buy in Ottawa County and even sent him a picture. David eventually found out that it was a fake house and fake address. It was a for sale house, but it wasn't one that she was going to be buying. He said that he actually called the number on the house because it had been for sale, but the realtor had never heard of Lisa. He said that he knew then that Lisa did not want him up there. But he says he didn't want to move up there anyway, so he was fine with that. He had a business to run. David said that Lisa sent him a text to tell him that she was tired of his lying and his cheating, and she was done with the relationship. Not surprisingly, David's version of what happened after the breakup is also very different than what we've heard from others. He says that he wanted Lisa's name off of the deed to the house because she didn't own up to her part of the bargain. And he admitted that he told Lisa he would, quote, burn the fucking house down before she got a dime out of it, end quote. David says that he and Lisa both ended up getting attorneys to argue over the house and the money. And he also said that after the breakup, he felt like Lisa was stalking him because Lisa called his uncle, but he said that he didn't know how Lisa even had his uncle's number. So he says that he texted her and told her stop calling his uncle. Then Lisa got mad, started cussing at him and calling him names and said that he was a liar. So he told her that he was going to go file a restraining order against her. But he didn't. He says the following Monday, Lisa filed a restraining order against him. And then he filed a civil suit against her, saying that he had loaned her money before and she did not pay him back. Things got pretty nasty. He said that Sanda and Lisa were calling people and spreading lies about him, telling them not to friend him on Facebook and saying that he had put a gun in his mouth and that he was crazy. He says he threatened to sue them for slander if they didn't stop. Now, by December of that year, David said that he was having some health problems. He said that he had a heart attack and had been in and out of emergency rooms with really high blood pressure, then had a pancreatitis attack. He also described one time that his blood pressure was so high that Lynn had to come and get him and take him to the ER for hours. Now, Lynn was asked about medical issues that she knew of with David, and she did mention the pancreatitis attack and said that he was on blood pressure medicine, but she didn't say anything about the heart attack or taking him to the ER for blood pressure. Now, David talks about New Year's Eve and the run-in, but his version is, of course, different than his ex-girlfriend Lynn's. Lynn said that when David told her that Lisa was there, she asked if he wanted to leave, and he said no. David, on the other hand, says that he told Lynn that he wanted to leave, and Lynn said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not letting Lisa have control over where I can go or where I can't go. My friends are here, so I'm staying. Doesn't sound like much of what she has kind of portrayed that we've heard from her, but that's what he says that she said. He says that the reason that he kept his eye on Lisa is because he was concerned that Lisa was drinking liquor and beer, which he says made her unpredictable. So he wasn't just staring at her. He had to keep an eye on her to make sure that she wasn't going to come from that table to get after Lynn or him. David talks about Lynn catching him looking at Lisa and said that Lynn got mad at him about it and kept turning her back to him in front of everyone. He said that he was mad and embarrassed. And that's why he said he decided to text Lisa that night to tell her that she looked beautiful. David said that he decided he was going to break things off with Lynn. His plan was to take her to Olive Garden on January 6th and tell her that it was over. David said on January 3rd, he went to see a doctor about his kidney, and the doctor changed up some of his medicine. The next day, he went and got his new prescription filled and went and picked up his son that night. They ate at Subway, he dropped him back off, and he headed home. He says on the way home, there was an erratic driver who almost hit him, so he said he called 911. When he got home, he said he took his medicine, including Celebrex, to help him sleep, which he says generally causes severe nightmares. Now, David said at first he didn't have severe nightmares with it. It was just funny stuff, like people's heads turning into Daffy Duck. But eventually, he said, it turned bad. David said that his blood pressure was up that night, but he went to bed in shorts and a t-shirt with his flip-flops by the bed, grabbed the remote, turned on the TV, laid down, and almost immediately fell asleep. The next thing he remembers, he says, is waking up in Polk County Jail, chained to the bed. Wait, what? This is his defense? He says he doesn't remember anything. It isn't that it was a crime of passion or that he was provoked or any of the things that it sounded like we were going to be hearing from the defense. He said he doesn't remember. That's the story he's going with. Now, in emails to his daughter that he sent the week of trial, David says that he cried in court because it's so hard when you don't remember what happened, then you see and hear things like he had been hearing, and that was really hard on him. He wrote to his brother and said, "As God is my witness, I don't have any memory of what happened that night." He said that for the longest time he was in denial about any of it, but after seeing the evidence, he was shocked. And he said for the last week, he had been sitting in his jail cell crying his ass off because at the end of this, he said he knows that he will be taking a long trip, most likely to death row. David's attorney shows a clip in court of David in the interview room at the sheriff's office and asks him if he remembers being there. He says that he doesn't even know where that place is and doesn't remember being there at all. Then his attorney asks him 3 more questions. Mr. Murdock, did you want Lisa Bunce to die?
I never wanted Lisa to die.
Did you ever plan on killing Lisa Bunce?
I never planned on hurting Lisa.
What about Sanda Andrews?
I never wanted Sanda hurt or harmed in any way. I never wanted either one of them hurt.
Interesting way to answer that question. Tuomi specifically asked David if he had ever planned on killing Lisa. He responded, "I never planned on hurting Lisa." So not only did he avoid answering the actual question, but it's a common practice of guilty people to downplay the severity of what they're being accused of doing. With that, the defense has no more questions. Then it's time for a fiery cross-examination. Now, I was only planning on doing 2 episodes for this series, but I decided I had to do a third because I didn't want to skip through the cross-examination and Murdock ends up taking the stand for a second time. There is just too much to put into 2 episodes, and this is a wild story that needs to be told. In the next episode, the prosecutor comes out swinging, holding nothing back. And during redirect, David opens up another can of worms that probably had Tuomi wishing that she had just said no further questions. Plus, David takes the stand again. Not only does he have a message for Lisa's family, but he also addresses Sanda directly. Plus, find out if David's prediction of being sent to death row was correct, or if the jury decided to spare him his life. Next time. My name is Brandi Churchwell, creator of 13th Juror Podcast. If you're enjoying it, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And share this episode with your friends. It's the best way to spread the word about these cases and helps others find us. For more information, photos, and episode guides, visit our website at 13thjurorpodcast.com.